Hi, my name's Tommy Powell, Technical Field Specialist with MGK. Today we're going to talk about occasional invaders. A little bit about my background. I have a master's degree in urban entomology from the University of Florida. So go Gators, I'm a Gator. I've been in the business for 24 years now. Most of my career I've spent in the pest control industry. My current role is with MGK, so I work in the manufacturing side, but I have been a technical director for three top 100 pest control companies. I've been a branch manager. So, what you're going to see for about 6 years of my career, I dealt with customers. I had callbacks. I was doing training in the field, and that's what you're going to get from this presentation. If you have any questions or you want to contact me directly, it's pretty easy at MGK. You just use my name, Thomas.Powell at mgk.com. Okay, we're going to talk about occasional invaders. So, what are occasional invaders? Occasional invaders is a big catch-all for a whole bunch of things. And we're going to cover a few of the most common occasional invaders. And like the name implies, it's not like these things are always in the house. It's just all of a sudden you run into this house that has this one problem. And they can be insects or arthropods. So an arthropod is anything with that hard shell on the outside of its body. So that even includes crabs and shrimp. So just things that are occasionally getting into the house and they drive us nuts, right? Because they can come in by singles, but then some of these can actually be significant populations getting into your customer's house. And they're not breeding indoors, so the customer shouldn't worry that, oh, this is going to keep going and going, and I'm never going to get rid of them. They're just wandering them from the outside for a variety of reasons, which we're going to talk about, and they're annoying. So a lot of these things, the reason why you get the call is because the customers are freaking out. Some of them are really scary looking and they look at them and they go, oh my gosh, what is that? What am I going to do? And a lot of times your traditional, preventative pest control treatments aren't going to solve this problem because you have to know about the biology of these pests. Because if you don't know the biology, you can't talk to the customer. I have solved some occasional invader problems by just explaining to the customer what they have, what it is, and how it's not going to be infesting in your house, just wandered in from the outside. Let's just go ahead and throw it back outside. It's not doing any harm. So, understanding that biology and being able to talk to your customer and get their understanding and their cooperation is the key to occasional invaders. Communication. You've got to be able to communicate with your customers. With some of these pests, and I'm going to get into some of them, I can talk to a customer and almost make them feel sorry for the arthropod that's coming in their house. If you can make them feel emotionally sorry for these arthropods, they're not going to call you. So you have to be able to have that ability to talk to your customer again about the biology and how they need to help you help them. Now, I organized this because it's the way I am into the most easy insects, occasional invaders, arthropods that you're going to deal with, to the hardest at the end. And I always hope at the end that we run out of time for the last one I'm going to talk about because it is very difficult. But we're going to start out with the easiest ones you might get a call for. They're the pillbugs, sow bugs. The first question I always get is, how do you tell the difference between a pill bug on the left there and a sow bug on the right? Well, typically, if you're like me when I was a kid, and that's why I became an entomologist, you played with little pill bugs. I loved catching a pill bug because they roll up in a little ball, almost like a marble. You can flick them across the room because they roll completely up into that little ball. Sow bugs don't do that. So one of the big differences is no matter how much you prod a sow bug, it's not going to roll up into that little ball. So that's a big difference. There are other differences, but that's what you see in the field. One rolls up, one doesn't. And these things are feeding on organic matter outside. So they just wandered in. Normally, I have personally never seen a large infestation of pill bugs and sow bugs inside. I've seen that outside. You pull some leaf litter back, you might see hundreds of pill bugs and sow bugs. But typically, when they come inside, again, just like the name implies, they're just wandering in. And what if you tell a customer that this arthropod, it's hard to explain the arthropods, this pest in general, that's what you can say. This pest is feeding on leaf litter. It's actually helping decompose all those fall leaves, and it's doing that for you. It's beneficial to the environment, and it just wandered in. It's not living inside your house. If you see one or two, that just means you've got a lot of leaf litter or pine straw or stuff around your house, and you could just sweep it out, pick it up, throw it out. It doesn't bite, it doesn't spread disease, it's not dirty. It's feeding on organic material out there outside. And they're usually active at night. So when they come up in the morning and they see one over by the sliding glass door and they go, oh, what is that? It's a pill bug. It's a sow bug. And you can show them how it's so cool that they round. Again, remember, see how what I'm doing? I'm trying to make that customer say, oh, that's kind of a cute pest or a cool pest. If they've got kids, show them how they roll up, and the kids will love that. And they don't want mom to kill them anymore, and they'll never call you back for this particular pest. You can solve that problem with just a conversation with your customer. Now, I have run into those customers that don't want any kind of pest in their house. So sometimes you have to treat for them. So knowing their biology and their habits, that these things are going to be underneath anything that's holding moisture, like a rock, any kind of, they have like a brick foundation around their, any of that brick around their mulch and stuff like that, keeping the mulch in. You pick up the bricks, you're going to see them there. Why? Because it's holding moisture. They're feeding on the organic material, but they're getting moisture and stuff like that. Downspout covers, where the downspouts coming down, and you have those little plastic things that feeds the water out in the yard. They're going to see them. If you pick those up, you're going to see them there. Those are the areas you want to treat. But if the customer wants to completely get them out of the yard and they want, hey, what do I need to do? Because I never want to see one of these roly-polies, even though they're cute and there's nothing wrong with them and they're not causing any problems, then getting rid of all that organic material. If they have a compost pile, that's a bad idea. Limiting the amount of mulch they have around their house, trying to get rid of that. Those are things they can do to get rid of them. If they have a wood pile, anything that's covering the ground, they get rid of that. There's less likely they're ever going to see another roly-poly around their home. So that's what they can do. What can you do? There's a lot of these roly-polies and sow bugs are not hard to kill. Okay, there's no resistance where they go, oh, you sprayed me with something, I'm not going to die. That doesn't happen with roly-polies and sow bugs. Whatever you use is going to kill them. I always recommend a microencapsulated product if you're going to use a liquid product. Why? Because it's going to last longer. Because remember what we just said, all those downspouts underneath brick, what is that? Moisture, right? So a microencapsulated product is going to last longer in those moist environments. Or a granular product. Granular products are great in these situations. If you have a lot of leaf litter, you put granulars on the leaf litter and it'll settle down into the bottom of that leaf litter and get to where the roly-polies and the sow bugs are. So treating those areas. And then really critical to stop them from getting inside is they don't fly. They're not flying all over the place, getting into the second floor. They're usually crawling underneath the door somewhere. Okay, so really focusing your treatments with a product that kills quickly, because the customer may not want to see even a dead roly-poly inside, so you need something that will kill them fast, which is sad, which makes me emotional. I'd rather you just let them be, let them outside. But if you got to kill them, we're going to use a quick kill product, something that's fast acting, right on the at the sweeps where the doors are. If you got a sliding glass door, which is really a problem, you want to treat all around the track and stuff like that. Really good to get chemical barrier there because that's where they're coming in. So that's roly polies. Dust, I see that on the slide there. Dust, I don't use a lot of dust for roly polies and sow bugs, but if you have like areas next to the bottom of the door where there's a lot of like weep holes or something like that, you might want to treat with the dust to keep the roly polies out of the home. So that's roly polies and sow bugs. That's an easy one. Right? We're going to get a little harder. So centipedes. Hard to tell a customer that these freaky looking things are okay to have in the house. That's the problem with centipedes. Roly polies, typically I can have a covered conversation with the customer and I can convince them it's okay to have, just let it outside, just occasionally come in. When you see, especially that house centipede on the right, somebody's going to have a reaction. They're going to freak out. That looks like some kind of prehistoric thing that nobody wants in their house. It's going to consume me at night. That's the kind of reaction you're going to get. Now, what I typically say to them is, this is free pest control. Okay. Both of these types of centipedes here, what are they feeding on? Insects. What are they feeding on? Roly polies. Those kind of things. That's what they're feeding on. So around your home, this is free pest control. These things are actually reducing insect populations and arthropod populations around your home. That's what they do. How do you know the difference between a centipede and a millipede? It's a number of legs. So if you look at the segments, that's the little lines on this particular arthropod, where they're little sections. Each section only has one pair, two legs. Okay, one pair of legs. Millipedes, which we're going to talk about later, have four legs, so two pair on each segment. So that's the big difference. And we're going to separate these two later on. I'll talk about the house centipede, a little bit different treatment than the regular centipede. So just like the roly polies, they prefer moist environments, right? So they like to be underneath stones. They like to be underneath those downspout covers, all those areas. Why is that? Think about it. What are they eating? Insects, roly polies. Where's the food? Underneath all those areas where there's lots of moisture. So that's where they're going to want to be. They prefer that they get all their water from the prey. So they're not there for water, they're there for food. And they will occasionally bite people. Okay, so this does actually have a little bit of a concern for customers out there. What typically happens is you got a customer, it's maybe the first day of spring, they're out there in the yard, they're planting all the new plants and they're enjoying the beautiful weather. They've been cooped up in the wintertime all winter, and now they're out there planting in the garden. They're digging around in the mulch. Guess what's in the mulch looking for insects? Centipedes. They can sting. A lot of times when they sting somebody, immediately somebody doesn't blame it on a centipede because they won't see this. They blame it on a spider. I got a spider bite in the garden today. I would 80% of the time put my money on it. It was a centipede who did that to you. You were digging around in the mulch, you were digging around in the flower garden, and a centipede stung you. And it looks like a spider bite. People blame it on spiders all the time. Okay, so they do have that bite, so they can bite people. So it's a little bit of a concern for customers, especially when they see them in the house. Same kind of thing with roly polies and sow bugs, right? What can they do? If you take away all the food, no centipedes are going to be at your house, right? If there's no food at your house, there's no centipedes going to want to be there. So where's the food? Underneath the mulch, underneath those piles of stones and things like that. The problem with that is when you're telling the customer this, and this is a good thing to talk to them about, when I spend a whole bunch of money and do all this beautiful landscaping and put all these stones out and it's covering, holding in that mulch, and I spend a lot of money doing that. And when you tell me this is where they are, if you want to, if you kind of remove that stuff, it's a good way to get rid of them. I'm not going to want to do that. Okay, so, but at least you're telling them where they came from. So you're setting that expectation that here's why they're here. There's food here. So the centipedes are here because look at all this beautiful landscaping you have in your yard. I can reduce the population, but this is why they're here. It's not that they're picking on you and you're some special person that's getting centipedes in your yards because you have all this beautiful landscaping, and show that to them. They're not going to want to remove all that landscaping that they spent all that time and effort doing. That's not going to happen. But at least when you explain it to them and tell them why they're getting these centipedes, they can maybe understand or give you a little bit more of a leeway. If they see a single centipede in their yard or on their deck or on their porch, then they'll understand that. So knowing that biology, talking to your customer, communication is critical, even for centipedes. We're talking about control. Same kind of thing. I like microencapsulated. I like granular, just like sow bugs. They're in the same place. When it comes to the house centipede, okay, that one, the picture you see right there, a little bit different. Okay, that thing's coming. If I get a call about a house centipede, most likely somebody saw it in a laundry room. Why a laundry room? And I would say 90% of the time when I get that call, they've got a crawl space. Immediately in my head, when somebody sends me a picture of a house centipede, I'm thinking, crawl space. That person has a crawl space and they saw that. That's a picture in a laundry room. So a lot of access from the crawl space into the laundry room. Got a lot of plumbing pipe stuff coming up in there. You got vents going in and out of crawl spaces to the laundry room. So a lot of access there. And it's a lot of moisture there. You'll get these house centipedes love crawl spaces. It is dark, moist, humid. They like those kind of places. That's where they are. I've seen them in basements, but most of the time I get them in crawl space. If you got an unfinished basement, especially if the part of it actually doesn't have a flooring and you got some of that, like a little bit of a crawl space coming in a basement. I've seen that, like half basement, little half crawl space. That great place for house centipedes. You got to get down in there, and here's where technicians don't like it when I say this. You got to treat the crawl space or the basement. Basement's easy, right? I go in a basement, especially if it's unfinished. You can do like a flea treatment down there. They're running across the ground, they're crawling up the walls. So I'm doing a flea treatment. I'm treating the whole floor, telling the customer, leave it alone. Crawl space. I know pest control technicians don't like to get into crawl spaces. Termite technicians do it every day. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to be the worst thing you did all day. In fact, if it's a hot day, they're cool. Crawl spaces are nice and cool in there. So you can actually cool down in a crawl space. But you can't treat for house centipedes, and here's I see the mistake, from the door of a crawl space. You stick your head in the door of a crawl space and no, that's just not going to do it. I don't care what piece of equipment you're using. You're not going to get to the under end of the crawl space. You got to do a thorough treatment with these house centipedes in the crawl space. That means going in and treating thoroughly. A power rig is a good situation here. Great, power sprayer, great, but you have to go in. You're not going to get all the way to the end of the crawl space unless you go in. So you're going to have to really treat the walls. That's where they're going to be. They're going to be on the support columns and stuff like that, the piers. That's where they're going to be. You want to treat all that stuff, and the house centipedes will go away. So a little bit different than a regular centipede, which you got a picture of it here. That's on the right-hand side. The house centipede's a little bit different. They like those crawl spaces, and you got to get in there and treat those crawl spaces. Okay, crickets. So that's the next. So centipede's a little more different than roly-polies, a little more difficult because especially the house centipede, you got to go in that crawl space. Now we're getting into crickets. You wouldn't think of crickets being that difficult. But the two types of crickets we run into are that top cricket, which is a field cricket. It's black in color, pretty obvious field cricket. When I see one of those, I immediately, that's a field cricket. And then this other one, okay, with the humpback. Again, just like that house centipede, kind of looks prehistoric. Like that is an ugly cricket. What is wrong with that thing? It is just weird looking. It's the humpback. That's a camel cricket. That's what it's common name. So two different types of crickets. Just like before with the centipedes, two different ways you're going to have to treat these things. Why do we get cricket calls? So we get cricket calls typically because they're active at night. They're going to wander into somebody's house. Why are they going to come into somebody's house? Typically because they're attracted to lights. When you have that customer that has always been told, you know what? The best way to protect your home from invaders is to leave that light on outside all night long. This is how you get a lot of occasional invaders. Going forward, most of them are attracted to lights, except for the very last one. So they're attracted to lights. So these crickets are active at night. They're coming out at night. It's the best time to come out. Why? Because less prey, they're more protected. They're, less visible from birds and things like that. So they're coming out. They're active at night, and they're attracted to light. They get into somebody's home. They don't usually get in large numbers, except for the field cricket. It can happen sometimes. They don't usually get into large numbers. They usually, that one cricket will get this phone call just like this guy here. Because here's what happens. The cricket gets in and the customer hears this. And they go and it stops. Okay? And there it is again. And they're running around the house trying to find it, and it stops. And then it starts again, and they get frustrated. At this point, that customer is beside himself, him or herself, and they can't handle it anymore, right? So that's when you get it's annoying. As I'm talking, you're like, oh, will that stop? I'll stop it. So that's why you get the phone call, because they can't find the cricket. They hear the cricket. They don't see the cricket a lot of times, but they keep hearing that over and over and over again. And they just can't take it anymore. And they give you a call. I've got cricket in my house. Somebody needs to come out here. And it's a single cricket. In my heart, I'm like, really? You're going to send me out for one little cricket? And I know most technicians have that reaction, but that's why. It's annoying. They don't want to hear that chirp over and over again. Okay, what can they do? If they're in an area that's prone for field crickets, there's farming communities, large fields next to their home, that these things will migrate and fly and be attracted to lights. Number one, reduce the outside lighting. Turn off your lights on the outside and your cricket problem will be drastically reduced. Caulking. If your company sells exclusion services, offer them exclusion services. We're showing them where they need to caulk cracks and crevices around the house. Cutting down weeds and stuff like that. Maintaining yards, giving it less, removing all that harborage area around their house, like wood piles and things like that, where the crickets can get in and harbor and things like that. So those are all things that they can do. What can you do? So for field crickets, you're probably going to have to go inside. Normally, I control most of these occasional invaders with a treatment outdoors. Okay. This one, you're probably going to have to go inside because they're hearing that chirp. Now, when you go inside to treat, you don't need any kind of special product. I don't care what you're treating with. Anything will kill a field cricket. The key is not the chemical, it's where you're treating. Trust me, if the cricket was out in the open, if it was on a baseboard, a customer would have seen it. So it's hiding somewhere. So the key to killing crickets, field crickets, in somebody's home is not treating out in the open. It's treating in all those places where the customer's not looking, behind the china cabinet, underneath the whatever it is, the couch or something like that. That's where they're going to be. They're not out in the open. They don't want to be out in the open. If they were out in the open, somebody would have killed that cricket with a shoe before you even got there, because they can't stand hearing that chirp. So you're going to have to treat in all those spots. And once you do, it's not hard to kill. You'll kill it. The customer will think you're the hero. You've gotten rid of my chirp, and they'll be very satisfied. That's field crickets. Camel crickets. Guess what? Camel crickets and that house centipede, same exact places. So camel crickets are going to be in that basement. You're gonna, just like I was talking about with the house centipede, you're gonna have to get in the crawl space. They love crawl spaces, and they're coming up from the crawl spaces. So they will live in the house. So that's what's different. Field cricket's going to come in. If you just left it alone, eventually it's going to dehydrate. It'll die, and you'll never see the. It'll just be done. Okay, somebody will find the dead carcass one day when they're sweeping underneath something. Camel cricket's different. It'll be living in that basement. It can live in that crawl space, and you got to get in there and treat, and you have to do a thorough job. Again, not from the door. You can try to dust crawl spaces. I always get those questions. Can you dust a crawl space? Yes, but dust is the same way. Okay, you get in the crawl space door, you can't just puff a little bulb duster and expect that dust to get all the way to the end of the crawl space. It's just not happening. Power duster might be a little different, but you got to be careful with power dusters in crawl space. Make sure that there's don't have any air ducts that's detached or any problems with your air ducts, because you don't want to get sucked up into the house. I've actually seen that problem before, so be careful. Best way to do it is just take that plunge, crawl in that crawl space. And I'm saying this over and over again because I know you don't want to. You have to crawl in that crawl space and do a thorough treatment in that crawl space, or you will get called back over and over again for camel crickets, because they'll keep coming. Unless you do a thorough job in that crawl space, you're not going to get rid of them. So, big difference between field crickets and camel crickets. Field crickets, sometimes you have to go inside, but both of them, remember, focus on the outside. Typically, if they don't want to turn on that off that light, or like at my house, there's a street light that I can't turn off in front of my house, then I know if there's a light there, right? Think about the biology. They're attracted to that street light. They're probably coming in from the front of my house. So all those windows, all those doors, I'm going to focus that treatment on. So when you're walking around that house thinking, where are these things coming from? Look at the light sources. Whatever light that customer leaves on or can't turn off, that's the side of the house, that's the area you really need to focus on and really do a thorough job with crack and crevice treatment around doors and windows, because that's how they're getting in. Except for the camel cricket, that's getting in with it's underneath the house or in the basement. It's probably coming from there. Okay, here we go. Earwigs. Now, an earwig is, and I've actually had customers say, you can read stuff online that is just so wrong. And it's an old wives' tale. The reason why the earwig gets its name is because it was rumored a long, 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 long time ago, before computers and the internet, that this thing would go in the ear. Okay, that's where it gets its name from, that it goes into the ear. And people freak out. They see those big pinchers and they go, oh my God. And when you say that's an earwig, they go, what? It's an earwig? It's going to go into my ear and eat my brain or something like that? No, 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 no. It's got an unfortunate common name, earwig. I honestly think we should change that name because I hate that name. But it uses those pinchers not to grab onto your eardrum and hang on, and eat your ear. It's got those pinchers to, again, be pest control. It grabs prey with those pinchers. That's what it's using them for. So this is free pest control. It's pretty easy to identify. They've got those little pinchers. As soon as you see those little pinchers in the back, long pinchers in the back, that's an earwig. Earwigs, they feed on dead living insects. So where are they going to be? They're going to be hunting. They're hunters, man. They're out there constantly looking for food. They're more active at night. Why? Because a lot of their prey is active at night. So they're out at night when the bugs are out, trying to, those crickets, all those roly-polies, things like that around the house. That's what they're looking for. They're going to be in the same exact places that insects are going to be. So when you're treating around homes, that's where you got to focus around all that organic matter, wherever their food's going to be. That's where you want to be. So, and they have those little pinchers, and that's what freaks people out. So the reason why I say this is a little more difficult, because a lot of times with most of the insects or occasional invaders I've talked about so far, I can convince customers, especially with roly-polies, sometimes with centipedes, field crickets, not the house cricket, but I can convince them that they're not a big deal. Earwigs are a little more freaky looking. You're gonna have to treat. There's no saying, hey, this is free pest control. Just take it and put it back outside. They're not gonna want to hear that. They're gonna see those pinchers. They're gonna think it's a scorpion-like thing. They're gonna maybe read some stupid article online that's completely wrong, and they're gonna freak out. And you're gonna have to do treatment. So you're gonna have to treat for this. What can they do? Same kind of things, you know, less harborage area for insects, food, the less likely you're going to get earwigs. And yes, they are attracted to lights. So the only large infestation I've ever seen of earwigs, where it was actually, I actually saw like 10, 15 earwigs in this lady's living room, is she had, again, another street light. It was very close to the back of her house, and there was nothing she could do. And at night, these earwigs would come to her house, and all we were doing was trying to keep them out. So we ended up treating around the street light. It was pretty close to her yard, so we ended up treating really close to the street light. So as they were coming into her yard, we were trying to keep them, killing them in the yard. So at least she saw them dead on the porch and not in her home. So reducing lights, that's a big thing. If they're and honestly, with all the other pests telling them to turn off the lights, they may or may not do this, right? With this, because they're freaked out by it, they're afraid of these earwigs, they'll turn off the lights for you. They'll actually reduce the lights for you. A lot of customers will turn off the lights, and when they, oh, I haven't seen one, since, and then all of a sudden they'll forget, they'll turn that light on, and they'll call you, and, oh, I got some more earwigs. Did you turn the light back on? Oh, yeah, the other night I turned the light on. Remember, keep those lights off. Very important. They leave the lights off at night, so they don't see the earwigs. So that's important. You can get them to do that a lot of times. It might take one or two times that you have to educate them on that. I'm a big fan of granular products with earwigs. I granulate all in the mulch. I'm granulating all in that pine straw. I love a granular product in here. Microencapsulated products too. And again, treating the entry points. But if you can convince them to get rid of the lights, they're probably not coming indoors anymore. Okay, so they're not going to come indoors, and you can lower the population around the structure by using those granular products, using those microencapsulated products. And again, the reason why I say microencapsulated products is because a lot of times you're dealing with moisture, and that's going to hold up better in those situations. That's why I like microencapsulated products for earwigs and a lot of these occasional invader pests. So these are why occasional invaders are different, right? So we're talking about biology and talking about control. That is earwigs. Millipedes. Now, and I know I'm weird, I embrace my weirdness, right? I used to have African millipedes. They're about that long, and I used to have them as pets. We had Frankie and another millipede. We had two of them, and one of them was named Frankie. He was the first. So they were a pet for me. So my feeling of millipedes is they're cute. They're not disgusting. They are feeding on organic matter. That little cartoon down there was a centipede trying to pretend like it was a millipede. It's a funny little episode if you've ever seen it. And they can live for a long time. So they're just out there in the leaf litter. And this is a pest that if you do it right, I've actually got customers to feel emotionally attached to the millipede. And if you can get a customer to cry, and I'm going to show you how to do that, you can get a customer to have a little tear well up in their eye about millipedes, they won't call you. Okay? They're not going to call you. They'll just let them be. So what happens? Why do they become occasional invaders? They don't want in the house. There's no reason for them to come in the house. They will die in that house pretty quickly. If you do no treatment whatsoever, they're not going to last very long in the house. It's way too dry in the house. Here's what happens. Millipedes are living in heavy leaf litter. Okay, so heavy leaf litter, that's where they are. So they're down there, heavy leaf litter, that's where you'll see them. And usually, if you can picture this, you have a house, right? House, and the builder is got that water wants to drain from the house down into a wooded area behind the house. Okay, so you want that. You don't want the water puddling up around the house. You want proper drainage. So all builders, when they're building homes, have the water coming. The house is sitting up high, and the water's draining down. Well, when that leaf litter in that wooded area behind the house gets too much water, they migrate. So think about it, and here's where I get the customer. Think about it from the poor millipede's perspective. Okay, they're just minding their own business. They're helping you degrade all that leaf, all those leaves that fall every winter in that wooded area. That's their job. And then all of a sudden, you get a lot of rain. A hurricane comes through, whatever it is. There's a lot of rain. They've got a decision to make. I either drowned or I seek higher ground. I mean, everybody on this call, everybody on this video would seek higher ground, right? You're not going to just go, oh, well, here comes the water. I'm just going to die, just going to sit here, just let the water flow and just no, they're all going to seek higher ground. What's higher ground? The house. The house is higher ground. The only reason why they're heading to the house in large numbers is because their whole home just got flooded. There was a flood and they lost everything. This is, see, I pour it on to the customer here. There's a flood. Those poor little millipedes lost their whole livelihood. They couldn't even get their family memorabilia or anything out. They're just trying to save their own life because of that flood, and they're going to that higher ground. And your home is higher ground for them. So they're going to come. There's nothing I can do. I can't train the millipedes to stop coming. They're going to come for higher ground. My goal is to keep them out of your house. So I'm going to kill them by the hundreds. And they'll come. See that picture right there? They'll come by the hundreds. There's a lot of millipedes in that wooded area, in those low-lying wooded areas. A lot of millipedes in there. And they'll all come up towards the house. And here's the difference. You're not going to treat up by the house. You're going to treat right where that yard ends, that ecotone, that where the yard ends and the woods begin, right there. That's where you're going to treat. Focus all your treatments there, because then they're going to start dying in the yard. They're going to die on the back porch, and you need to explain that to the customer. Sorry, I'm going to slide ahead. Explain that to a customer that you need to get this. You're going to see this. They're going to come up out of the flooded area. They're going to wander up towards your house. My goal is to kill them in the yard. So when you see dead millipedes in the yards, there's nothing I can do. And I've actually had customers goes, "Are you sure? Is there nothing you can do to save them?" And I'm like, nothing I can do to save them unless you just let them come up into your house. I can't save them. And what you're trying to do is get their acceptance to see this, because they're going to see them on the back deck. And if you don't explain this to them the right way and give them the biology of what's happening and why they're coming up, they're not going to accept all this on their back deck. My goal is to keep them out of your house. They're going to die on your back deck. There's nothing I can do. They got a choice: drown or go through my chemical. Most of it, all of them are going to choose chemical treatment to die rather than to drown. So they're all going to come through my chemical. They're going to start dying in your yard, and they're going to start dying up by your patio. And when you're treating, you want to use a quick kill product. You want to use something, if you guys are mixing products together with exciter in it, or you can use something like an MGK product that already has exciter in there. Microencapsulated granular products, you can try that, but I really like taking that perimeter away from the house. Don't treat up by the house. It's too late for treating up by the house. You're not going to kill them fast enough. They're going to be all into somebody's house. You want to treat them at the edge of the yard. You want to create that kill zone at the edge of the yard that's a place you normally don't treat. That's where you want to treat. Stop them from coming in. You can treat around doors and windows again if they're still getting in, but typically that works for me. But explain it to them. Explain them why it's not that they did anything wrong. It's just the poor little centipedes trying to save their life, and they're trying to get up out of that water. And that's all you're going to do is kill them the best you can, right? So again, try to get that emotion from your customer, and they won't call you back. Yeah, that's worked for me many times, even in difficult customers. So now we're going to talk about springtails. Getting down to the last two most difficult, and I always pray on the last one that we run out of time, but I'm not going to run out of time today. I'm right on time. So springtails. Springtail gets its name for that little tail. Those are dead springtails. Normally, you don't see that little tail, that little forked tail at the end of their body. That's usually tucked up underneath. It's right up underneath their belly like this. It's folded up underneath their belly, and they get their name because when you mess with them, when you touch them, they take that tail and they just fling it out, right? And they don't know where they're jumping. They're not like a cricket or something like that where they've got direction. They're just flinging their body somewhere to get away from whatever centipede, earwig that's trying to eat them, right? So that's their getaway mechanism. They spring tail, they take that tail, they spring it out, and they go flying in the air, getting away from whatever predator that's trying to eat them. Typically, yeah, those centipedes and earwigs that are trying to eat them. So they can breed in huge numbers sometimes. There's a lot of springtails out there in normally just minding their own business underneath all that leaf litter, underneath all same kind of places. And what they're feeding on is decaying algae fungus. So it's not organic matter. It's really, they're in soil. They love that organic algae, that fungus that's in that. So when you pull that mulch back and it's been there forever and you see all that fungus and stuff because the mulch is rotten in there, springtails love that, and they can be lots of them in there. Great place for springtails because they like a lot of moisture. If you have in the summertime, an air conditioning downspout where all the water drains from the air conditioning unit, if it's next to the house, that's always wet. And if it's always wet, whatever underneath it, the mulch is going to rot. And when it rots, springtails will breed in there. That's usually the first place I look. I'm looking for those little air conditioning drains and where the water's just coming out, and I'll start pulling the mulch back and looking for the springtails. You put your hand down and hundreds of springtails go all over your hand, you've got it. Other places you can see them, because they do get in that soil, wet soil, people who overwater their plants. So let's say I've got plants on the outside of my house, and this time of year in the fall, people are starting to bring those plants back in. They might have been overwatering those plants, and people do that all the time, all year long. When they breed them in, bring them in, that's a question you got to ask with springtails. If they're seeing them like, I'll, typically, when I see springtails, it's usually in a bathroom around plumbing. I'll explain that in a second. If they're in a weird area, like, oh, they're just in my living room, I see springtails all in my living room, I'm going to start looking at any plants around that area. So you got to look for those potted plants, anything like that, where they're overwatering that soil and you're getting that fungus growth in that soil. A good, easy way to kill them in a potted plant, stop watering the plant, right? Treat the soil, you'll kill the springtail. Stop watering the plant so much they won't come back. So that can happen. So what can they do? Remove moisture. Moisture's not your friend with springtails. So if they're constantly watering their yard because they love in the spring and summertime that beautiful green grass, and they're constantly, and they've got little spouts, their sprinkler systems are mulch, hitting that mulch every single day in the summertime when it's really hot, good way to get springtails. So back off on the watering. That's something they can do. If they're getting in a crawl space or something like that because of moisture, I've seen that before too. They'll get in crawl spaces because of moisture. Dehumidifier, you don't need to treat at all. That's, hey, don't have to go in the crawl space and treat. You can sell them a dehu, suck out all the moisture, and all those springtails will die. So water is your thing. When you're looking around the house for springtail problems, think of water. Where's the water? Where is it accumulating? What can I do to limit the amount of water around this home? You got to do that. Chemical. This is difficult. This is why I put the springtails in this order. So chemicals hard sometimes. Typically, springtails will come up. I get this call from a customer. Happens all the time. I've got fleas in my bathtub because they're about the size of a flea. So and they jump, right? I told you they spring. So you go messing with them in the tub, they'll jump. I got fleas in my garden tub. Common. I've gotten that call a bunch of times, and immediately in my head, they're not fleas, they're springtails, and that is a slab home. That is no crawl space. Okay, so slab home. If you ever go out to a construction site, it's just a sight to see. And you think of this garden tub on the slab, you think, oh, there's a plumbing pipes are coming up from the bottom of the slab, and it's just a small hole. No, those those guys that do the plumbing, they know that they're going to have to move stuff. So that hole for the plumbing pipe in the bottom of that garden tub is probably that big around, about the size of a 5-gallon bucket. It's not small, okay? It's not a small hole. They're usually huge holes. And what'll happen is water underneath that slab will, if it's not if the property's not draining right, will drain underneath the slab. When the soil starts to get all that fungus and starts to get that rot, springtails start to breed. And now you got this big 5-gallon bucket size hole underneath the tub, and they start getting underneath the tub and they end up in that tub. They can't get out. They're just, flailing around in there, and people think they have fleas in the tub. Two things that you should think about. If it is a whirlpool tub, got jets, it's an easy treat. Okay. At that point, I'm like, whoo, you have just dodged a bullet, my friend. You have dodged a bullet. If you've got one of those whirlpool tubs, you have dodged a bullet because there's an access panel. If it's got a pump, there's an access panel somewhere on that tub. You can open up that access panel. You can treat in where that 5-gallon bucket hole is, and boom, all those springtails will disappear. They're not resistant to insecticide. The problem is getting the product to where they are. Remember, potted plants, the big hole underneath the garden tub. If there's no access panel, this is where it's usually hard. Typically in these situations, because we're talking about moisture coming in, going underneath the slab, that bathroom that you're dealing with is right by an exterior wall. Okay, so I have in the past, this has worked for me, dug a trench like a termite treatment. You have to call your termite guy out at this point, and you get the rod and you rod underneath the slab, and you're putting chemical underneath there because you can't actually open up a hole in the tub. You don't want to do that, right? You can't cut a hole in their tub, so you're going to have to do it from the outside. So you can rod underneath that slab, and you can kill those springtails that are underneath the slab. So that's a problem. With the mulch and stuff like that, go with your granular treatments. Really entry points are, they're okay. You can treat those, but really focus on where the water is. In your mind, when you're thinking springtails, that's the problem. And in the summertime, when they're pumping out water to keep their grass alive, it's a problem. That's an issue you gotta deal with. You gotta talk to your customers about the biology of the springtail, why they having them. It's really overwatered soil that they're coming from. They need to back off on the sprinkler. They need to maybe even long term with that tub situation, get a French drain that puts water away from their house, that fixes their moisture issue that's underneath their slab. That's not a good thing either. They can work on that, and that'll long term fix that springtail problem. So that's springtails. Last one, and I have debated 100 times whether or not I should just take this slide out and pretend like this is not an occasional invader, but it is. And all the other pests that we deal with, occasional invaders, I don't mind going to. If you and I were together and we were doing some jobs together, we still springtails are fine. I got some inventive ways to treat springtails. All the other pests are fine. Clover mites, I'll probably find something else to do. Clover mites are difficult. How do I identify clover mites in the field? You can read all the stuff here, which I normally don't do, identification. But here, well, the way I identify them in the field, you're going to get a call. I got these tiny, tiny little things in my house. Okay. They're about the size of the tip of a pin, right? Really, really small. And the first question I ask the customer, if you smash it, does it leave like a little red stain? Absolutely. How did you know? And I go, clover mites. Clover mites. I'm shaking my head. They usually can't see me over the phone, but I'm shaking my head and going, you've got clover mites. So I can drive down the road. Clover mites feed on new growth. Is number one thing you got to know about clover mites. They feed on new growth of plants. So they're in everybody's yard. If you have grass in your yard, you've got clover mites. Well, why don't you have clover mites in your house? Why don't you see them all the time? So here's what happens. I could drive down your neighborhood and pretty much predict who is the most likely to get clover mites. It's going to be that yard that when the weather just turns barely warm, it's the first nice day, their yard as green can be. They're the greenest yard in the entire neighborhood, and it happens immediately. Well, what happens is over time, the clover mite population in that customer's yard just go bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're happy. They're totally fine being in the yard. You'll never even know you got clover mites in the yard. Nobody even knows. So the population explodes. Then the customer forgets to water, or it doesn't rain as much anymore, and the customer doesn't have a sprinkler system. And on that sunny side of the house, it always happens on this side of the house. On the sunny side of the house, the grass starts to die. And that is where the problem lies. The grass gets brown. What do these things feed on? New growth. Green grass. That's what they're feeding on. They don't feed on dead grass. There's no food for them. So when there's no food for them, they're going to leave the grass and be all over the place. I would love to tell you, here's the best product to use. And I hear, well, you got to use this. You got to use an emulsifiable concentrate. You got to use this. That's all baloney. Okay. Those clover mite I have used agricultural products to kill clover mites and not got success. You read all the books, and I'm picking on other entomologists here like myself. Read all the books, and it says take and remove like a section of grass. And I've actually made a customer do this and just leave bare dirt because they won't cross bare dirt. That's baloney. Cloven mites will cross bare dirt. I've done it. I've seen it, and they'll cross bare dirt. When the grass is dead in the yard, they're going to leave the grass. Just like the millipedes, with the water, they're going to leave the grass. And that customer with high populations of clover mites will see them indoors. So what do you tell them? Water is their friend. I usually tell the customer that this is what the biology of the clover mite. Clover mites are in everybody's yard. But the reason why their neighbor, Mrs. Smith and Mr. Smith, don't have clover mites is because, they look. You got this sunny side of their house. Look at how your yard is kind of it's dying over here. It's brown looking. It's a problem. That's why the clover mites are coming out of your grouse. Everybody has clover mites. Everybody has them in everybody's yard. They're in here. They don't have any food, so they're wandering out of your grass. So number one thing the customer can do is water their yard. Okay. So what do I do? And I, if you got a customer who doesn't have a sprinkler system, who has gotten clover mites in the past, I'm usually very interested in treating that sunny side of the house, that yard, early in the season, right? If you run into clover mites in a house, this happened to you want to really make sure you start treating that whole side of the yard. You don't want to wait until August. It's too late in August. So you want to start treating that side of the yard. I have before with customers put granular products out. Not that granular products are going to kill the clover mites, but I'll tell the customer this is a water activated granular. And I know this is the little white lie, but it's what I do. It's how I've gotten rid of clover mites. It's a water activated granular. So I need you to water this quite frequently. Like I need you on this side of the house to water it, a couple days a week. I need you, well, guess what happens when you water the grass over and over again? The green grass starts again. And like magic, the clover mites are no longer looking for food. They're going to stay in the grass. If there's new growth of grass on that sunny side of the house because they're constantly watering over and over again, and you tell them either, to do it because that's what's going to solve their problem. Sometimes they don't want to hear that, or to do it because you put a granular in the product and that's going to make it work better. However you get it done, you got to put water in that yard. So this is why this is the most difficult to me, occasional invader, because it is not a chemical solution. You can treat all day long on the outside of that house. You're not going to solve it with chemical. Green grass is going to solve your problem. That's going to help you. That's going to make it go away. Inside, customers going to want to know what to do. You can treat indoors. It's not really going to kill them. They can remove them with a vacuum cleaner. It's the best way to do it because if you wipe them, they're going to leave a red stain. A vacuum cleaner, you just stick it over top of them and they suck them up and they go down the vacuum. So got to throw away the bag eventually, get rid of them. You don't want them crawling out of the bag. But, that's the best way to do it is take that vacuum hose and whoop, put the ring over the little dot and it'll suck them up. That's the best way to do it so they don't leave a stain indoors. Hard to deal with. Hard to tell a customer that your chemical is not going to kill something. That's why sometimes I use the granular trick. I use that granular trick because they don't want to hear that I can't treat it. Other companies might tell them that they're lying. Okay, so green grass is how you solve that problem. They're in everybody's yard. It's just they're always on that sunny side of the house. I can go up to somebody's house, walk in their front yard, and go, that's where the clover mites are coming from because I see all the crinkled grass on that side of the house. So that's your problem. the clover mites. And watering is the only way to solve the problem. So again, if you ever have any questions or want to reach out to me, you can always get me at thomas.powell@mgk.com. It's the best way to get me. You can email me, and I'll respond to you. Any questions. Thank you very much for having me.